been sought to be made in the income tax ordinance. Let me just say, to remove any doubt, if there is any, that whatever we utter and say here is totally apolitical. It is purely professional, and it is purely driven by the honest belief as professionals what we think best for the country. So let there be no allegation of taking the side of this or the side of that. Just call spade a spade. When we try to evaluate the provisions of the finance bill in terms of the amendments or new insertions, we are primarily guided and we try to test on the touchstone of a few fundamentals. And in doing so, we are conscious of the fact that extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And we undoubtedly are going through, and have been going through for quite some time, through extraordinary times. So we as a nation have got quite a capacity and appetite for accepting very extraordinary things. But that having said, we would like to test whether the amendments that are proposed does have any direction or not overall in the scheme of economic scenario. Are the proposed amendments serving the objectives of tax reforms agenda which the country has set on? To my mind, a few things which come to light. The gear is in the reverse. We are going in the reverse direction. Whether the amendments taken as a whole through the finance bill, whether it gives a sense of positive direction, is there any conceptual merit in that? Is it consistent with the overall government's policy framework or not, if there is any policy, so to say? Whether it would serve the objectives of alleviation of poverty, or would it remain merely as ever a lip service? Would we be moving towards a socially egalitarian society? And whether the resource mobilization needs are addressed in a sagacious and rational manner, rather than going in all directions. And whether the functions of tax administration, incidentally, Saru Sahab is not here, our chairman of the session for this evening, maybe he may be joining any time, whether the functions and objectives of tax administration, they are going to foster what we call a harassment-free tax administration, and our tax is going to be levied without tears and without fears. I do recognize the fact when there is tax, there is pain. When there is pain, there are tears. But are they manageable? These are a few fundamentals on which we would like to test whatever the amendments have been proposed through the finance bill. Each year, you would recall that shortly before the budget and almost around the year, there is a persistent yearning for three aspects with regard to taxation. Why not capital gains on shares are brought into the tax net? Why not real estate business? And why not, last but not the least, why not agricultural income? Well, thanks to our chief guest, Mr. Tareen, that during his tenure as the finance minister, he paved the way with an open debate, with a very pragmatic discussion with the concerned stakeholders, and this capital gains has been now finally sorted out. It is now part of the statute, hopefully, once the finance bill is written into the law. Real estate business, perhaps in due course of time, this may also be addressed if all mean well. But as far as agriculture income is concerned, I said this morning before the Institute of Bankers, and I repeat again, I do not see it happening in the collective lifetime of everybody sitting here. Although there have been some sort of whispering yesterday, in the Senate probably, that why not agricultural income be taxed? Whether the gentleman saying that meant it, or whether that was meant to just play to the gallery, I don't know. And I don't have any reasons to cast any aspersions on his intention. But the fact remains that this is not going to happen, at least, if not in at least in the foreseeable future. Why not? All of you know. This so-called constitutional disability coming in the way. We have sort of traversed through a lot of areas in solving the constitutional issues in this country, to the extent of sometimes keeping it in the where it is destined to be. So constitutional restraint may well be there, but there may be ways of bringing agricultural income to taxation. It should happen, it may happen, but as far as today's indications are concerned, the present indications are it is not likely to happen. And thereby we are leaving out a big chunk of our GDP out of the tax net. And that we keep on clamoring that we do not have a proper tax to GDP ratio. It is not going to happen without that. As far as capital gains are concerned, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, it has come on the statute book now. It will be applicable from all transactions effective on July 2010 and onward. And it is going to cover all the listed securities, and they've been defined in the law. I don't want to go into the details for want of time. The rates are fairly reasonable. Conceptually, there is a proper distinction made between short-term and long-term. Those which are sold after holding it for 6 months, they are subjected to a different rate. And the rates for the future years as well have been spelled out in the finance bill. For some unknown reason, financial year, for tax year 2010 is also mentioned, although they are not going to be taxed in tax year 2010. Either it is an inadvertent mistake, or whether there is something beneath it, I can't say. But tax year 2010's rate is also there, which ought not to be there, given the fact that it is going to be effective from July 2010. For 6 months to 12 months, there is yet another set of tax rates up to 2015 for each year. And for those after 12 months, obviously they will continue to be exempt. But those which are unquoted shares and securities, as at present, they will continue to be taxable. There is no change in that. Banking companies, well, they will be taxed under the 7th schedule. So there is no special treatment as far as this is concerned here. An amendment has been made in section 37. To some it appears to be, quote unquote, it's a very sinister amendment, that from the definition of capital asset and from the stocks, capital asset is defined to mean blah blah blah, but does not include stocks, not being stocks and shares. These words, not being stocks and shares, have been expunged. Some of our friends do read a lot into that amendment. I would just leave it to future as to how it will unfold itself. There is another amendment with regard to, rather introduction with regard to capital gains, that there will be an advance tax payable on capital gains for those which are sold after 6 months. The advance tax rate prescribed is 2%, and those after 6 months but less than 12, the advance rate is 1.5%. So for the first time, and you know this capital gains has been off the hook since 1974. And for the first time, when the amendment came in, it was held, and the operation of this particular provision was suspended for 2 years. And then again for 2 years. And then there was a lot of hue and cry. There was a persistent demand that we can't do our long-term planning. The stock market will suffer a blow, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, the government ought to come up with a long-term strategy. So instead of 2 years exemption, it was extended to a lease of 5 years. And that lease deed kept on being renewed every 5 years since then. So I think in this context, the budget has done, I would say, the right thing. I'm not too sure whether the right thing has been done at the right time or not, because the kind of resource mobilization which is expected out of this avenue, considering the trend on the stock exchange, what kind of revenue the government will be able to mobilize, it is anybody's guess. Because whatever we are observing, and I was just being whispered by the Honorable Chief Guest that the market has gone down today by 300 points. So whether this capital gains tax will remain decorated on the statute book, or whether it will mop up the kind of resource mobilization which our friends in Block P and Q are expecting, I can't guess. But hoping not against hope, the important thing is